Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cap and Gown. We are starting season 7, which is incredible. I'm Rachel Phillips Buck, Senior VP for Student Success at Ferris Resources, joined today by Matt Boisvert. Hey, Matt.
Hi, Rachel. It is pretty incredible.
I know.
When I think about how this started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty crazy. Well, you and I are both feeling a little bit of anxiety because we haven't done this since May.
No, I'm so rusty. Yeah,
it's
for
like
sure.
Riding the bike, and we're just going to get on with it, and it's going to go great. Thank you guys for joining us. It is always such a privilege to be able to spend time with you. And I want to talk about everything that's happened between May and now. So far, I was just talking to Bailey about this. It's like everybody where I'm like, how was your summer? It's like, did we have a summer? Do you feel that way, Matt?
Oh, I totally feel that way. Like, how is it the end of August?
The end of August. It is the end of August, which is so crazy. And we know for you guys that means you are in what I consider to be the best part of the rhythm of the academic year, because you have a lot of shiny new freshmen who are showing up on your campus.
Energy is back to campus,
Yeah, who have great expectations about their year, and they're optimistic, and they are just trying to make their way. And we love that part. But also you get to see all of your friends who are students who you didn't get to see for the summer. They're all back on campus, getting settled in. So just a really fun part of the semester.
The parents have left so that,
Right. Like, let them go. Now this is our actual community that we're going to spend time with. And actually, all of the things that have gone on over this summer, this episode is all about our summer State of the Union. So I have gone back to what we talked about in May. I've read literally hundreds of articles that came out between May, June, July, and now the end of August. And we've compiled a list of things that I think are going to be really relevant and exciting for us to talk about. But in terms of important things that happened this summer, first of all, Matt, you and I both have high schoolers, so that is new.
That is new. And I was thinking, and my son graduated from college, so that happened first, right? Now that's crazy, because then he started his full-time job.
Yeah.
And now we have high schoolers.
Yeah, it's pretty fun. Also, I know that everyone is waiting with bated breath to hear about your Colorado fishing trip, which is, one of the staples of our first episode of any season. So do you want to give a summary on that?
It was just a brutal fishing summer. The river, in some parts, my stream was down 4 feet. Oh. The fish are just hanging on. It's so hot. There just wasn't enough snowfall in the mountains, and then it's just hot. And so, so it made it not really fun to fish, because, in fact, on our river, they put in a voluntary closures request that you not fish between noon and midnight.
Wow.
And so that, which led to just more time with the fam.
Yeah, good. All right. Well, did you catch any big fish, or that sort of put a restriction on your fishing allowance?
Well, I'll put it this way. In total, I think I caught 22 fish total.
Which is not very many. It sounds like very many to me. But
I can catch 22 in one day on this stream. Yeah. So that was kind of shocking. But I did manage to catch 2 16-inchers, and that's all right. No trophy.
Not going to win a trophy, but it's okay. At least you got to go. And to be fair, it was cooler there than it was in Texas. So at least you got out of that. That's nice. Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, I have a couple of notes before we jump into our special State of the Union episode. The first one is, Matt, we do kind of a weird thing. It makes sense in my brain, but everyone else might be like, what are you guys doing? We do a weird thing where we pick a book for the year. So in January, we unveil the book. We do it for an entire year. We are right now in the middle of David Brooks' How to Know a Person, which I love. We have 3 or 4 more episodes marching through this. Really great book. Encourage you to read it. Also, remember in January, we're going to start a new book. So if you have a book that you love, that you want us to cover, that you think our listeners would appreciate, drop it in the comments. Love to hear about the books that you love. In fact, that's one of my favorite things, to get book recommendations. I have a stack of books that we've got to read. But the other thing that we do is, starting in August, to follow the rhythm of the academic year, we unveil our theme. So if you remember, last year our theme was presence, not like gifts, but like being present.
Right.
And, you know, we picked it last year because we were sort of in the face of a lot of AI stuff going on, which I want to talk more about. But we were like, remember, the most important thing is for you to be present with your students, to see them, to make sure that they understand they matter and that they're connected. And so I think we had a great year of that, practicing presence with the people that you're with. So I really love that one. Usually we do a review, but you know what? After 7 seasons, I can't remember them all. So I know we had Kintsugi in there at some point. Can you think of any of the other ones we've done?
Well, we've done Curiosity.
Yeah, that's a good
It
one.
is my favorite. Curiosity was great. I think
we did Joy. Didn't we do Joy one time?
we did do Joy.
Yeah. So,
well, put me on the spot.
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sure that Z or Bailey can send us a list, and if we get it, we can remind you. But this year, for this academic year, our new theme is going to be anchored. And Matt, I think we're going to have find time to actually like dig into why you and I picked that and the relevance of it. And I think there's a lot to be said about it. But what I would just say in brief now is that as the water is moving all around us, as there are waves and there are tides and there's perhaps tsunamis in some cases, the truth is that you have to be anchored to what is true and what is real. And so we think about things like your mission and your values and your dedication to your student success and what you believe that means about how it's going to change their future. It's so important to have that connection to what is real and true, so that you can survive all of the things we're going to talk about today in State of the Union, and all of this sort of turmoil that comes just from living in the world. So I think it's going to be a really helpful theme for us to just continually have that touch point of coming back and saying, what is anchoring you to reality? What is keeping you safe? What is making you feel secure? And what is giving you clear direction about which way you're facing and which way you want to go, despite all of this upheaval and things moving around you as waves?
Well, right now, I wish Sherry Woosley, Dr. Sherry Woosley, was with us, because I think she's going to love it too. And what I'm thinking about, Rachel, is exactly the way you described it. You do have the personal perspective of being anchored, and what is anchoring me, what do I find, what is true. But that also is what is true about our institution. And all of these things that we're going to talk about today, all of the news that we're going to cover, events or challenges that have faced higher education over the summer, over this past year, but also looking forward, and being able to think about it in terms of like, what is anchoring us in this situation?
Yeah, for sure.
But then outside of our institution, just thinking about like, as a country, as a, I don't know, there's so many other factors that like, what really is this anchoring thing when we're facing big issues, whether that's, war or political or things like an enrollment cliff, right? And so,
yeah, for sure. And I think it's worth thinking about in terms of how you must be anchored in order to anchor your students. Because this is the other thing we're doing. We do this as parents, but we do it as higher education professionals as well, to say like, if you can keep the right things under you, you will have a way to be able to navigate through whatever happens, right? Negative or positive. So I think it'll be a really fun theme for us to explore over the next 2 semesters, and I'm looking forward to it. So if you have an opinion about Anchored, tell us about it. Love to hear from you there. Also, I want to mention really quickly that Callie and I are going to be at the ACA in Asheville. That's the Appalachian College Association. So not this month, next month, September, at the end of September. And Matt, I'm so excited because the ACA is always a place for me where I think about not just our theme for the year, but like, what is our presentation going to be anytime that we're at a conference or anytime we're doing a webinar? Like, what do we want to talk about this year in that terms? And I'm just telling you, I'm super excited about this one. This presentation, this session that I'm going to do, which you guys probably will hear about for the next 9 months as I learn more about it and dig into it, is all about student success debt, which, you know, that is a phrase that we've coined. I think it's so powerful. And this presentation is about student success debt, what it costs, who pays the most, and why it's hard to uncover at an institution. And so just thinking about things like what happens in the handoff between offices, between departments, and that sort of between office space where there's friction, where there's confusion, where you're not getting warm handoffs, like everything a student experiences there, and how that's not experienced by students equally, right? Some students are able to absorb some of that friction and difficulty, and then some of them, you know, we've talked about this before, where there's like bandwidth to be able to absorb something. And depending on what's going on in your life, like if everything's great and you have no problems and you've paid your bills and you come from a happy family and whatever, you might be able to absorb some of those things. But some students are really wrestling with food insecurity and not knowing how to navigate the system. And for those students, success debt looks much different. It is much bigger, it is much harder, and they don't have the expertise to be able to overcome that. So I think it's a great thing for us to dig into.
In the same way that, you know, if you think about, well, this person owes $500, well, what does that mean to them compared to this other person?
Right.
That's exactly the right way to look at it.
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's going to be a great presentation, and I wouldn't be surprised if it turns into an episode for us, because I think it's going to be super helpful. So, okay, you guys, typically we do 20 minutes of State of the Union. If you are joining us for the first time, Matt and I usually talk for a little bit. I call it chit chat about things that are going on. And then we do about 20 minutes of State of the Union. I read all the articles so I can tell you about things that are happening that will affect you and your institution and your students. And then we go on to whatever the meat of the episode is. This is a special occasion because we are going to spend the rest of the episode on State of the Union topics. I want us to talk through things like accreditation, which is a really big deal, student loans and financial aid. We've got some enrollment issues. Of course, we're going to talk about AI, but all of the things that are shaping the way you and your students are experiencing this semester in the beginning of a new school year. So very excited to dive into the State of the Union. All right, let's start off with a little bit of context and what I consider to be a pretty bright spot in the sort of gray hazed higher education news that we're going to be talking about today. One thing is thinking about what we're learning about student success, how we're thinking about how they're successful moving through their student journey. So persistence and retention are climbing on our campuses, especially for students who historically have had the most difficult time staying enrolled all the way through to graduation. So the National State Clearinghouse Research Center just released its data for spring of 2026. It shows that Black undergraduate enrollment is up 3.4%. And graduate enrollment for that same population is up 6.5%, which both are really outpacing white student growth. Hispanic and multiracial students saw very similar gains. So that's really exciting to think about how we can serve that population of students and give them support. Unsurprisingly, community colleges are really where that growth is happening. So overall, they are up 3.1%, with total post-secondary enrollment at 18.6 million, which is really amazing. To think about the special niche that those colleges serve and the way that they think about degree completion and entering into the world of work. Pretty amazing. Also, nationally, 80% of students now rate the quality of their education as good or excellent, which is up from 73% in 2024. So we've got a 7% increase there.
I'm pretty surprised at that one.
Why?
I mean, if you think about, well, just think about, I mean, way to go. Kudos to everyone joining us
Right.
for delivering on that. But it's interesting because there's this side kind of, oh, students think of it like consumers and they don't really, they're not really invested in education. There's like this whole like, I don't know, poo-pooing of it. But what I hear is, and there's this whole other conversation about, college isn't delivering the value and right? And is it worth it? And well, if 80% are satisfied and are saying they rate it as high quality,
Yeah.
then that's a good sign. That's a surprising, because you hear all this other banter, right?
Yeah. And I think, of course, we have to do more research about this, but I would just say when you have students who have lived through everything they've lived through for the last 6 years, and are coming with some different challenges than we've seen before, it sounds to me like what institutions are doing through success coaching and advising and faculty engagement, all of those things are paying off. That students really are hungry for that kind of engagement and understanding and connection with people in a world that, all of the data says that our students who are coming are lonely. They're lonely. They're not used to being in the kind of community that our institutions provide. So I for sure think it's hopeful. And I also think it should be an encouragement to us that you really can make a difference even in the face of all of these difficulties that our students are bringing that maybe we don't have expertise in, but that slowly we're learning how to support them through to success. So I really love that. More to say?
Well, I would just love to see our schools collect that information about their students, right? If the benchmark's 80%, like where are we with that? Where do our students rate our education quality?
Yeah. And Matt, it's like you've said before, I think sometimes people are resistant to collect that data because they feel anxious about it. They're like, oh, I don't know if I really want to uncover that. But the truth is, if you're doing a good job, you do want that data. You do want to be able to say, when a student comes to see me, here's what they say about their engagement with me. So
absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. All right. I would also like to refresh everyone's memory on our accreditation. I don't want to say like accreditation woes or accreditation like changes, or I guess maybe it depends.
Look, I was in the room when at SAC-COC it was announced the changes that were going to be made, and I mean the weight just lifted.
Yeah.
In that room. There were a lot of people who have worked very hard on accreditation for their institution. And for some of them, it's kind of like, it's like, man, they just made it easier for everyone else while I just, went through this grind.
Yeah.
But really overall, I think there's I think, I don't know. I think we can be positive about at least where people are leaning or thinking about the changes that are being made.
Yeah. So I'm going to review those changes for us, but I do want to say, what I think is happening, to your point, Matt, is that sometimes when you have expectations, like somebody's like, you have to do these things. You have like, this is what we're going to do. And you're like, this is stupid, but I have to do it because we've got to get accredited. Right. And then when the pressure is taken off and someone's like, okay, well, maybe you don't have to do it that way, or maybe we can, just delay it. What happens is a lot of times people are like, wait a second, there's some really valuable things there, right? We
It's
want
what
to
you say. Yeah, it's throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and it's like that's the other piece of it is the questions were like, well, what if we like our QEP,
right?
Like,
What if we think this is a good plan, right? Yeah, for sure. So just to refresh everyone's memory, back in May, we talked about the Executive Order 14279. It is reforming accreditation to strengthen higher education. It's a 151-page order that had just closed its public comment. The headline themes of that order were they wanted to reduce the regulatory burden on schools. They wanted to ease how institutions can switch accreditors. So they didn't want you to be so locked in that you didn't have options about who you chose to get your accreditation from. They wanted to make sure that accreditors had integrity and that there was competition in the market. They wanted to work from a presumption that transfer credits will count as core credits, not just electives, which I love. I think is so important. We'll talk about transfer students in a minute. And then also a really hard push towards program level student outcome tracking. So they're like, these are all really important things that we need to make sure that we're building into how we understand universities to work, how we understand the value, how we talk to students about why and what they're going to experience at school. So now that process has sort of created something concrete. On the 20th, so just last week, the Department of Education published the actual notice of proposed rulemaking. And that is accreditors will have to evaluate program level retention, which is super important. They have to look at completion, licensing outcomes, cost versus earning return. There's actually a lot of new language in that that's going to protect academic freedom and viewpoint diversity. And then written faculty performance evaluations become a requirement, which get ready, you guys, because that is going to cause some wrestle on your campuses. And then also transfer credit documentation. So we're in the middle of our comment period. It runs 30 days. The final or the target for the final rule is November 1st. And then implementation for whatever those changes are is going to come about in July. So we have a year to kind of understand them, make sense of them. And then in July, those things are going to happen. So I think there are a lot of really good things in there. And I think it will be interesting to see, sometimes the difficulty with these kind of rules is that we like the spirit, but the execution can be very difficult for especially smaller institutions. So it will be interesting.
Another cliche, the devil is in the details, right? As they get into that. But I think, it's interesting because when we talk about like, hey, is your institution measuring how students feel about your educational quality? And then there's this line about faculty performance evaluations becoming a requirement.
Yeah.
But shouldn't universities want great faculty?
Right.
Like,
yeah, well, listen, don't get me started on all the reasons why we don't do faculty performance evaluations. There's like some very historic and systemic reasons why institutions don't do that. I think the way you get them to move in the right direction is you just say you have to. It's just an expectation of everyone, right?
I still have mine when I taught. That'll shock you. But my first evaluations were as far as what I was hoping for, awful.
Oh no!
Oh, I can show them to you, but it's like, it's like I need to do a better job of connecting why this assignment, this very difficult assignment, will make a difference in your career.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And I learned a lot from that. And I don't know how you improve if people aren't giving you feedback.
Right.
I mean, are you really? I don't know. There are some people who maybe can do that, but having feedback improves quality.
Yeah, and I would say, some of these other things, Matt, you and I were just talking today in an unrelated subject about how when Ferris started in whatever year we started, a very long time ago.
2008, but 2010 we jumped out of the airplane and said, let's do this full time.
And we would go to schools and we would talk about outcome measurements like persistence and retention and student success. And they'd be like, I don't know why you're talking about that, right? And so in the beginning, there was this whole like hard work we were doing to say like retention's important. It's about financial health. It's about delivering on the promise that you make students when they come. It's a very important thing. And we still have schools that are like, I don't really, we get them and they leave, and then we fill in the pipeline with some more students and then they leave. And so I like the idea that we must all become fluent in what our retention is, what kind of measurements are we looking at to make sure we're doing a good job. It is a good practice to measure what you do and understand the impact that you're having on your students. So I like that part of it.
And related, just because, why not? But what's interesting for our best schools is that they're not just interested in measuring retention. They're now getting into the what leads to. So we need to measure registrations. Before registrations happen, how many holds are out there? What's the size of the balance, right? Like, so that upstream thinking we're starting to see, and definitely with our clients, we see that. But yeah, and so if you're at an institution that doesn't want to measure a thing like how well your faculty do, then that tells me you're not really invested in the student experience or outcomes, right?
Well,
maybe that's too heavy-handed, but
I do think it's very interesting. There is a perspective that has lived on campuses for a long time, which is retention happens. Like, we don't know. We have freshmen come in, and then in the fall, we have the big meeting where either we've done a good job of retention or not. And nobody knows. Like, how could you ever have your finger on the pulse of what's happening? Okay, well, everything you just mentioned is an indicator of what that number is going to look like. Matt, on the retention intelligence side of the house, we say you have to look at persistence from fall to spring, because if you are not looking at that, then you are going to be shocked when you get your retention. Because if you've lost 20% of your freshmen from fall to spring, guess what? Your retention is going to be very, very low, right? So there's all of these little indicators like registration, like your persistence numbers that give you an inkling. And when you are measuring it, what it does for your campus community to say, well, I can't impact retention. No, but you can impact registration, and you can impact how students engage with faculty, and you can impact persistence, right? Those are things that you can do something about.
And you can stop putting that terrible adjunct faculty in the class that has 300 freshmen.
Yeah, for sure. So I like the idea that, like you said, upstream thinking, backing up from, yes, we want to measure retention. It's super important. But there are all of these places that we can do things that then give us indicators and also action plans. If you're not getting people registered, guess what? We got to figure out what to do about that, because they're not going to retain if you aren't doing a good job of getting them registered, or clearing their parking tickets, or making sure they have enough money for their books or whatever. So I like this emphasis. Again, you're right. The details are going to make a difference, but I think it's nice to take, Matt, we always say there are a lot of people in higher education who don't think of that as a business. It is a different thing, but there's something nice about moving any institution towards measurable outcomes, because then you can make a greater impact on students. That's the point of it, right? Yeah, not just competition about retention numbers, but it means you care for your students well.
Yeah. And let's just start off with this theme where we have this administration's Department of Education pushing this out, right? Mm-hmm. And that on its own will lead to a lot of what's the right word? Just a posture of,
people being unhappy with it.
However, being anchored at the why we're doing this is right. Like I think being anchored on, we want to be excellent and deliver, and that is going to lead to a better student experience. It's going to lead to enrollment growth, because we're going to be, no matter what they're saying, no matter what resistance I feel to what they're saying, I need to stay anchored on what is important.
Yeah, Matt, don't you think? I mean, can you imagine having a retention committee meeting this week, right? When your students are coming back and writing on the whiteboard the name of every student, every freshman who did not come back for their sophomore year. Write it down in your retention committee and look at however many students that is and say, we know these students, we know what's happening with them. And the reason we're having a retention committee meeting is to make sure that this doesn't happen to our freshmen that we're welcoming now. It anchors you to what's important, and it changes it from hubbub about like, right, to like, what are we going to do?
Literally sat on a retention committee where they talked about light bulbs.
About what?
Light bulbs.
What?
Like, well, I think one thing we could do is make sure that we're replacing the light bulbs which, okay, everything speaks in that.
You should do that.
But why aren't we just doing that?
Right. Why do we have to committee about that?
I'm just saying, like, there are serious retention committees, which is what you've just described, setting that up, and then there are others that are more there for, I don't know. I've been on those committees, so.
Okay, we'll just leave that there. The next thing that I have on our roundup is all about student loans and financial aid. Remember, this is a story that we started in May. I'm so happy to be able to talk about the FAFSA in positive terms this season. So first of all, I've got three things.
I mean, I think this is, for 6 months, we've been able to be positive.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I have three things that I want to weave together. The first one, remember, we talked about last May, the Education Department finalizing regulations that tighten the definition of professional student. They are doing that in order to make some caps and determinations about how much money you should be able to borrow. They added into professional students theology and clinical psychology, which I find very interesting, but I'm just going to leave it there. And so that is the very first piece to remember, that we do have this definition of professional students and the cap on how much money you can take out for undergraduate and then also for your master's degree. So just reminding everybody that that is happening.
It's now in effect.
It is now in effect. Yes, that's right. It's been passed and that's now in effect. The other thing that I think is important to say in this idea of financial aid and student loans is loan servicing has moved to the Treasury Department. So you guys remember I told you they're taking a bunch of stuff that was under the Department of Education and they're parsing it out to other departments that already handle something similar. In this case, they are giving loan servicing to the Treasury. The Treasury is taking over collections of the $1.7 trillion in federal aid loans. So there's a whole portfolio. They're now in charge of that. There are 10 million borrowers already in default. And so the Treasury, which they say they're really good at collecting debts, they're going to start doing this. The concern is that educational debt is different than a lot of other kinds of debts. And actually, the Department of Education did things like account rehabilitation that was a pathway to like restore if you were in default or you hadn't paid, like here's how we're going to fix that for you so it doesn't affect you in some really negative ways. We don't know if the Treasury Department is going to keep on with that or if they're going to have sort of a different posture towards collections because they're used to doing it in different formats. So I think it's interesting just to watch what's going to happen there.
Okay.
And then lastly, FAFSA. So we talked about their newly automated identification verification. What's really nice is that they have started screening applicants in real time. First of all, to catch fraud, which hallelujah, because I don't know if you remember, but California's community college system reported 31% of their applicants for the 24-25 year were fraudulent. That cost across federal, state, and local aid, it cost $13 million because of those fraudulent applications. So obviously, it's a huge system. Like there's a lot to be said about that. But just the idea that we've got to cut down on that. Let's save money by making sure we're doing a good job. On the reverse side, They also are doing a great job of pairing that with some really good things for our students and their parents who are trying to understand how much money they can take out and how much money, they have access to. So students with a valid social security number can create an FSA ID and finish the FAFSA on the same day instead of having to wait several days. That's amazing, right? Like, it seems like that should have been the case from the beginning, but now it is true. So I love that. Parents can be invited into the form with just an email instead of all of this other stuff that you used to have to give: social security, family name, birthday, blah, blah, blah. And the last one, Matt, is that small family businesses, family farms, and family fishing operations are excluded from net worth asset reporting, which is really interesting as well, right? They're like, we're not going to take that into consideration. Nice break for students whose parents own smaller businesses that they don't have access to that money, right? It's not like that should count.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So I really love that. I think there are some changes there that are going to make it easier for first generation and rural students to complete that like more seamlessly. But I like the idea of like, how do we make this easier for our families just to understand what they can get, right?
Yeah. That seems reasonable.
Yeah. That's one of those things where you're like, in retrospect, how is it possible that in 2026 you have to wait a couple of days, right? Like, they're using AI now. AI is like, here, yes or no, right?
Surely.
All right. Next on my list, enrollment management. Matt, I really don't want to talk about this, and I'm just gonna let's just go back to the Atlantic's article in May, which I would like to remind you was called "The Looming College Enrollment Death Spiral," which, geez, y'all, can we not be quite so negative?
But it's going to get you to click on it.
Yeah, of course. But what they said in this article, and what I would like for us to think about, for our listeners to think about, to keep their eyes open, is basically that we have now in this country two different paths for students. One is this very national market where you have very big schools that are high in prestige, where high achieving, often affluent students are competing for seats that those institutions have. Right. So they have a huge pipeline of students who want to go there. Everybody's applying. They can pick out the people that they want. And that's one market. The other market is this sort of local market where you have middle and lower class income students who want to stay close at home. They don't have sort of the luxury of being like, what is the best school for this thing? It's like, I need to stay close. I'm going to stay at home with my family. I want to save costs that way. I don't want to travel across the country and have to fly back every time. And that those institutions really have a remarkable opportunity to serve better the local students that are near them who would be interested in that kind of service. And you and I have talked about this from the beginning. It's like everybody wants the name the prestigious school. Everybody wants those students. But if that's not who you're recruiting, if that's not who's coming, then you have a different responsibility to serve the students that you actually have.
Absolutely.
So I really love that. I also would like to say that I think it's in this one, there's something about, so I love this. There are some schools that are really, I don't love this part. There are some schools that are really in trouble financially. And there was a great article in the Hechinger Report, which was called "Are Faith-Based Colleges in Trouble?" The consensus of that article is really that it depends. That institutions that have a clear identity and have strong aid packages are still getting the students that they need. Those that don't have a distinct value proposition are the ones that are showing up in the Department of Education's not financially responsible watch list. which I would encourage you. We're going to drop you. Sorry, you may have noticed that we're not doing slides around our articles. We're going to drop all of those in the liner notes so you can just go and pick up the links. I want to make sure to put this one in. They have just published a watch list of basically fiscal responsibility for all of the colleges and universities in the United States. And so the ones that are not doing a good job of articulating value are the ones that are having a lot of difficulty. Anything to add to that?
That's going to be an interesting list.
Yeah. Matt, will you talk a little bit about, you were just telling me about a college where they have now said faculty have to be on campus.
Yeah, this was just came out. Inside Higher Ed and has an article at Texas A&M Victoria campus. And the story, the foundation of it is that faculty are resigning from Texas A&M Victoria because the school has started to enforce a faculty need to be on campus 5 days a week rule. And so obviously that's creating some pushback on that campus. And I don't know, I should have dug into the extent of that as far as the number.
Well, I bring it up now because as we're talking about being anchored to your identity, I think it is so interesting to dig into the values of faculty who are like, I want to teach, but I don't want to be with students. And I know not all, clearly not all faculty are like that. And most of our faculty on our campuses love students, they're teaching institutions, they love that. I bring it up now just to say, it is about where you're anchored. And thinking about serving a population of students where you're like, oh, I don't have to be with them anyway. Like, I don't need to have those collisions. I don't need to do that kind of mentoring. I want to live off campus. I want to show up on Zoom. I want to provide my lecture. And that's the extent of what I do. Matt, you and I talk all the time about how you define the job determines how you do it. If your job is providing a lecture, then you can do that from anywhere in the world and you can do it on Zoom and you've done what you need to do. If your job is about helping and investing students on campus to grow and learn and mentor them, it is much harder to do that if you don't have a presence in the real world, right? So how you define that makes a difference. It changes the decisions that you make. And these articles are saying, if you have a clear picture of what you're trying to do, your values, your mission, your commitment to student support, that will change your policies and your procedures and the way that you show up for your students.
Yeah. Well, in this case, it's interesting because this is the only Texas A&M system campus that has interpreted a state law to this extreme of like, actually, it's not just 5 days a week, but it's 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It's a 40-hour. If you're going to work here, you need to be on the campus 40 hours a week.
Which also is dumb.
Yeah. We'll define that.
I feel like there's somewhere.
I go to the football game, does that count? Do I go to the
right?
But the other side, and again, it's like, you know, the other side of it is, I think it was the chancellor who said that their enrollment is up 23%, and they're trying to welcome their students. Yeah, which I think is your other point.
Well, okay, please don't make me go on a whole rant about the value of higher education. And is it lectures, which you can get from the best faculty at any school online, or is it mentorship and connection and relationships? And so, it is just lectures, lecture from the mountains of Utah. If it is connection, you have to be around. Right.
But that's what I'm saying about like, as long as you give me credit when I am with the students at the basketball game and I'm eating in the, food court or.
Okay. I have to be careful. I don't usually share my full opinions, but this is one of those things where I'm just like, faculty are important. It is a high impact practice to have faculty connected to students in meaningful ways. You should pursue that, right? All right. let's go into our favorite topic, AI. Matt, I just like to remind our listeners and you that 3 years ago, we did an episode on AI where we were like, it's called Chat GPT. I'm sorry, the stupid name, but that's what it's called. Here's how it's being used. Here's how your students are using. And now AI is ubiquitous. If you are alive, you know about AI, you have expectations about AI. You and I were laughing, like in the beginning, it was like, hey, Claude, can you please tell me blah, blah, blah. And now it's like, Claude, you stupid. Why are you like higher expectations, right?
Your response, Claude. Yeah. Well, it was probably 3.5. Well, longer than that. 4 years when I said to my kids, like, whoa, hey, just know, your teachers are figuring it out. And
no, Matt, that's not true. What you said to your daughter was, did you use AI to help you write that? To which she went, right? Because it's like, how do you know about that? How, like, it's like slang that you like threw it at the table and she's like, oh my gosh, my dad knows about AI, right? That's how under
literally last night I said to my new high schooler, I said, hey, you know that Claude is now putting watermarks in everything.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah, I actually loved her response because she's like, yeah, Dad, I've signed like 5 different honesty statements and, all of my teachers have made it clear and they're looking for it. And yeah, why would I ever?
Yeah.
And I was like, thank you, because this is an important time for you to learn the foundations. And she's like, yeah,
for sure. I mean, if you love learning, that's how you would respond. Okay, a couple of things about that. Gen Z sentiment towards AI was souring last May when we talked about it. With 31% of students reporting.
I'm sorry, souring, booing commencement addresses.
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
Of course. 31% of students reported AI makes them feel angry. Yeah. So you have all these commencement speakers who are like, hey, the future, and everyone's like, shut up.
I don't have a job. Right.
We don't want to talk about it. Only 22% of Gen Z feeling excited, which is down from 36% the year before. So like they've gotten into it and they're like, it's not all that it's cracked up to. Also remember that we talked about Washington Post reported that computer science majors fell 8.1% in fall of 2025, which is the single largest major decline since 2020. Students started shifting towards data analytics and data science, and engineering saw a 7.3% bump overall. So they basically were like, never mind about this, we're going to move over here. So I think that is smart. And then also lots of talk, which in a couple of weeks, we're going to have a guest on to talk about AI with us. And there's a lot of conversation about how, yes, AI chatbots are good in a vacuum. If there's an absence of other resources, that is a great element. But it does not take the place in tutoring or in mentorship of those resources. So people like to be with people. AI is good when there's a vacuum, when there's nothing else. But in general, people like to engage with other people. There are caveats to that. I'm not saying every time, but I'm just saying that's important.
I just had I don't know. This is my, I'd like to stir things up, but if you're in a meeting, it would just be interesting if you're in a meeting with a let's just say a president's cabinet, and they're leaning toward replacing people with AI. A lot of, and we've heard even some competitors talk about this. And I think the first question, which would be really interesting, is, well, why can't we just replace your job with it? And that would be pretty fun. That would be a fun conversation.
I mean, hopefully you'd be like, no, because here's things I do that AI can't do.
Right.
But also, Matt, I don't know that I told you this. I was just at a conference where someone was talking about a student who had Claude or some AI on their phone. And for every social interaction they had, whether it was in class or in the cafeteria or whatever, they would record what their talking partner had said, like, hey, so I was just in class, blah, blah, blah. They would record it, and then they would say to Claude, give me a response. And then they would read from Claude, oh, that's interesting. That professor also, blah, blah, blah. Like, they would read it. And students were like, hey, I'm not comfortable with this person recording everything I'm saying. And that person was like, I can't operate in social situations without Claude telling me what to say, which there are interesting elements there that I would really like to dive into and tease apart. The difference between coaching and tutoring, like a counselor would do, like our listeners would do, like I've done with students before, which is like, let's practice. When you go talk to this faculty member, here's what you're going to say and how you're going to say it, versus this AI has become me, right? And it's like, it's going to listen to you and it's going to tell me what I should say next. Really interesting use case to kind of dig into ethics, the philosophy of AI, how it's teaching or restraining people from growing personally. I think there's a lot to be said there around that piece.
I would love to have a deeper conversation about
that. I would love that. All right. I'm going to skip our number 6, which is just dual enrollment and transfer pathways. I feel like for everyone who listens, do you want to, okay, unless you don't want to skip it.
No, that's fine. I think you're right. We talk about it often. Be intentional, dual enrollment, as we talk about the enrollment death spiral or whatever they called it. But really, if your institution is not developing connections for dual enrollment, with working with your local school districts or schools that are affiliated with your institution, wherever they are, it really there's a whole lot to say about it, but it's the right thing to do. It's a smart bridge, and it's preparing students and giving them the confidence that they can be successful in college. So it's a no-brainer.
I do want to say, because you and I have said this for a very long time, this came out of our attention intelligence and all of the work that we've done with institutions over the years, that there is this perspective that dual enrollment has become, that's all I'm going to say about that, a program of privilege where students who have understanding about how college works because they have parents who have done that, have money to enroll in dual enrollment, that idea of dual enrollment then becomes a place where only privileged people live because other students don't know that they should be pursuing it. And Matt, the experience of students who are coming to campus with 0 credit hours, no transfer credit, no AP, and what that says about their experience at being in college, their experience in knowing how to prepare for college, the resources that they have, the school districts that they go to. There's a lot of surrogates in that fluency in transfer credits and AP credits that we have to be super intentional about teaching our high school students how to utilize that. And if high schools are not doing that, colleges have got to identify those students and give them those skills to be able to come into a long semester and be successful.
It might be the best return on investment that you could make as an admissions team to go into the schools and say, hey, we're going to pay for this for every student who wants to take this class dual credit, or the AP classes, or whatever the fees are. I mean, some of these are, but I think that in our local school district, I think they went from free to fee, and we need to go to those. Our institutions ought to be going to those school districts and saying, like, that's crazy. I'll pay for it.
It is a way for students to level up to college work, everything else held constant, so that when they get to college, they are used to college work when everything else is changing, right? So in this place where they're anchored with their family and their school district and what they're doing, then saying, in this safe place, we're going to teach you how to do college work, so that then when you come, you have you're acclimating to everything that's changing, not college work. You've already done that, right?
All right. Skip it then.
What?
We can skip that then.
Yeah.
I feel like
we'll skip it. We'll just skip it. We won't spend any time on that one. Okay. And then I think the last one, two more. Workload and one, so higher education has a workload problem that came out of the Chronicle in May. Basically, it's just like, listen, people are getting burned out. Half of higher education staff work extra hours beyond their FTE. Over half of student affairs staff cite unhappiness with long hours and weekend work as a top reason to leave the field. Higher education is much better at adding programs rather than subtracting to them. And bold and underlined, workflow automation only helps if you've actually mapped the process, not just handed someone a tool. Let me just say that again. Workflow automation only works if you've mapped the process, not just said, here's a tool. And Matt, it makes me think of when we first did Spark, which is our data analytics. We give you an analyst. They'd run all of the analytics on your campus and give you retention. And it's incredible. When we first started that, we gave our schools this tool so that they could go in and do it themselves, right? We're like, here's the tool, go in, run all the data you want. And we had schools that were like, okay, first of all, I have a whole job. That's not it, right? Second of all, I don't know what I should be looking at. So thank you for giving me this super powerful tool, but I don't understand what I'm looking at, how to get there, what questions I should be asking. I think that is very similar to what we're seeing with things like AI, where it's like, here, use it. And it's like, okay, well, can somebody give me some fluency in this so that I'm not just getting a tool, but actually it's going to be pragmatically useful for me?
I think it goes back to John Gardner, right? A program is not a plan.
100%.
And in this case, it's like a literal program, and an AI program is not a plan. How do you plan to become fluent?
Yeah.
In whatever.
Yeah. Which, shout out to Anthropic. They have a whole new curriculum, which we're going to talk in a couple of weeks about how to become AI fluent. And their definition of that and the way that they've laid it out, I just think is going to be so helpful as you're thinking about how to apply AI. One more thing about this, and that is that Secretary McMahon issued an open letter in August asking universities to publish statements of principles on admissions, free speech, faculty hiring, tuition, AI, and foreign influence. So remember this, like, they pitched it back in May and they're like, we're going to cut your funding and you're going to get bonuses if you do a good job and blah, blah, blah. They've cut out all the carrot and stick stuff. And now they're just like, hey, we want for you to tell us about these things, which, again, to our point in the beginning, measuring things is super important because it gives you a goal and helps you understand the places where you need to invest.
So I think it lands right at, your anchoring, right? Define it.
Yeah.
And that ought to lead to really great conversations on your campus.
Yes, for sure. Okay. The last thing I have for you is a couple of student success practices that I really, really love. One of them comes out of Ferrum College STAR program, which is students taking academic responsibility. They are automatically enrolling struggling students into weekly coaching, tutoring. They're looking at their attendance and a 1-credit seminar. And basically what came out of that program is the president saying, like, we have expertise in what you need to learn in order to be successful. We're not going to ask you if you want to do it. We're going to do it because we have that understanding of what's going to help you. And Matt, you and I, this just made me think about the difference between, and I know that this sounds like simplistic, but I want for us to, like, I need to absorb this. The difference between saying, if you need me, come and see me, which is one thing, which I think about me as a student. If someone had said, if you need help, come and see me, I would have literally never come to see them.
No way.
No way. So the difference between if you need help, come and see me, and come and see me, once they're there, do you need help, right? It's why connection is the second thing in our student success funnel, because that's on you and just let me know if you need something versus, hi, I see you. You're in my office. What can I help you with? Totally different perspective. And I just love that change in, posture towards students. So I think that that's really amazing.
Great job, Ferrum.
Yeah, super awesome. Okay, and I think the last one that I'm going to highlight here is this idea of reducing non-tuition costs, not just tuition. Listen, what is happening with prices these days is out of control. And it is worth at your institution looking at your pricing structure, looking at the fees that you're adding on, going to your vendors around providing food and some of those other things, the cost of books, like all of that stuff, just going and saying like, hey, is there anything that we can do? Chopin State negotiated a 12% meal plan reduction and froze all mandatory fees because they're like, it's too much right now for our students and families to absorb. So I think it's worth saying, every 5 years, you should go to all of your people and be like, hey, if I sign a longer contract, can you make a deal for me? Can we reduce this cost in some way so that we're taking care of our students who are living in some hardship oftentimes? So yeah. I really love that. Anything else you want to add before I do our summary? Okay. I love this idea. In a couple of weeks, Dr. Ayanna Harris, who is the Senior Student Support Ombudsman, which I love. What a great job at the St. John's River State College system. She is going to come and talk about how she has worked in the community to get resources for students who really need it. And I listened to her at a conference I was just at, and I was like, oh my gosh, this woman is incredible. So I cannot wait for you guys to meet her. And her spirit of how you advocate for your students with vendors in the community, with churches, with nonprofits, I think is going to be really, really helpful for us to dig into. So I'm super excited.
Just a great upstream thinker.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. 100%. So, okay. So everything that we have just talked about is all of the changes that are happening in higher ed that are external environmental factors that we don't have a lot of control of. We've got to know about, but we can't necessarily mitigate. What we can do is understand what's happening, be anchored to our mission and our values and our support of student success, think about those bigger issues, and then talk about how do we engage with our student given what's happening in the environment these days. I think it's so important, and it's kind of a hard start to a season, but I think it's the right start, because once you know all of those things, then you can translate that into how do we execute our mission and values? How do we help our students to be successful in the mix of everything that's happening externally?
All right. It's going to be a great year.
Yeah, for sure. You guys, welcome to the fall semester. I know that this is a very taxing time as well as a very exciting time. So thank you for spending time with us and for trusting us to give you some of the State of the Union things that you want to keep track of so that you can help inform your institution and your students. I am super excited about this semester and all of the episodes that we have for you. We're going to have some really great thinkers come in to help us just think through all of these changes and what's happening. But always valuable to be able to be with you, and have a great day.